Hey everyone, I'm back. Sorry for the delay in a few months there. It's been really hot here, so it's kind of hard to film in this little room when it's so hot, but we've got a cool day today. So here I am again to present to you number 20 to number 11 of my 50 favourite films. So we're getting very close to the end now, and let's get it rolling with number 20. Number 20 is Children of Men.
Julian, that's disgusting. Look out!
Jesus!
Go. We're gonna make it. Come on,
I'm not gonna make it. Jesus! Right!
Save us! Oh, wait, run.
This is from director Alfonso Cuarón, who's a really great director, and this is definitely my personal favourite from him. It's really a bleak look at a not too distant future in the UK where women can't reproduce anymore and terrorist attacks are a daily occurrence. So it's a very bleak look at the future, but the future from 2005, which it's, when you watch it now, there's a few things you're like, oh, it's a bit scary. These things really could happen in the current world we're living in. So it's a very good, realistic, almost in a pragmatic kind of way, looking at this future. But the main draw of this film, along with its excellent performances, they've got Clive Owen, Julianne Moore, Michael Caine, is it's really well choreographed long takes. There are some sequences in this film where there are some extremely long takes, many minutes long, and they're just executed brilliantly, and it must have taken quite a bit of planning and choreographing to achieve, but yeah, it pays off just beautifully. And it's just, although it's quite a bleak film, it's also a very exciting film and a very tense film, and that realism really comes through because of these well shot long takes. Dialogue sequences that usually extend into full-blown action sequences really help to define the believability of the situation these characters are in, and really help make the film as fantastic and as classic as it's become. It is definitely one of the best films of the early 2000s, and in my opinion one of the best sci-fi films ever made. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It wasn't a huge hit when it came out, but it's definitely developed quite a big following since then, for good reason. Number 19 is Team America World Police. I don't have the DVD here, my brother has borrowed it, so sorry I can't show you the DVD, although I'm sure you know the film.
Well, police, get down on the ground!
Terrorize this.
So I'm a huge fan of Matt Stone and Trey Parker, everything they've done with South Park over the years, and now delving into musical theatre with Book of Mormon. They just continue to basically top everything they do as they go along. As I've seen with South Park, it's just gotten better and better as it's gone on, and with Team America they were brilliantly able to skewer pop culture and just America's obsession with war and with weapons and with just blowing crap up and with the celebrity culture in America, which they parody so greatly in South Park. They were able to parody even better in this film with their involvement with the war in Iraq at the time, and how they got very involved and tried to make a difference themselves. And so basically they've taken marionette puppets like in Thunderbirds and created a Michael Bay-esque type action film which Michael Bay in itself is funny, unintentionally funny, and I think Matt Stone and Trey Parker really saw that that side of Michael Bay's films and really went out to make something very similar, just with puppets, but with their own sort of sense of humour thrown in as well. There's all the things you'd expect from them, like all the very dirty jokes and lots of swearing and over the top melodramatic type acting, and it's definitely their usual brand of over the top, very witty, but definitely unbiased humour that they put into all their projects. And it's extremely funny. I do remember going to see it in the theatres originally when it came out, and yeah, I remember I was crying, laughing. I was laughing so much. Yeah, I was in tears. It was so funny, and it's still funny to this day. You can watch it back and still laugh every time. And yeah, it's still hilariously relevant. All the North Korea stuff, even though there's a different leader now, it's still very relevant in today's world.
This isn't about sex, Gary. It's about trust.
Number 18 is Kill Bill. Coming 2 DVDs. There's not one yet that I am aware of.
Is that what I think it is?
You didn't think it was going to be that easy, did you?
You know, for a second there? Yeah, I kinda did.
Silly rabbit. Tricks are for kids.
So this is Tarantino's homage to great martial arts, swordplay, and Western genre films. Something that he knows a lot about, both genres, as you can see in his films. And yeah, it just really staples his reputation as an auteur and how knowledgeable he is about these sorts of films and how many references he throws in to these films when he makes them. And this is a really, really big example. It is one film, but because of the epic story length of it, it's been divided into 2 volumes when it was released theatrically. But it works very well as 2 separate volumes as well, since the first one is very much like an Eastern martial arts flick, and the second one is more sort of like a slowed down, dialogue heavy Western. But yeah, hopefully one day he releases it all as one film and we could see it all together. So Uma Thurman plays one of her most memorable characters as the bride in this film, and it's definitely one of her greatest performances. Tarantino just seems to be able to get a great performance out of her whenever he puts her in one of his films. And the training she did with Yuen Woo-ping, who's a really fantastic martial arts choreographer who's been used in many films, really pays off in this, and she's very convincing and a very powerful female lead. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have David Carradine as Bill, very menacingly played, and but very understated as well. And he's it was one of his last films, but it was really great for Tarantino to use him, and because it was quite a big comeback for him. The way Bill explains his motives to the bride is pretty awesomely written. And the standout for me is definitely the Crazy 88 scene. It's such an amazing scene, and even though a part of it is in black and white, it still doesn't take away from the awesomeness of it and the way it's all put together. It's just so crazy and really set a new standard for those sorts of action sequences in films and fights. This was definitely the first film where I really got to see Tarantino sort of take it up a notch in terms of his filmmaking standards with cinematography and sound, not just with his directing and his writing. There was definitely more emphasis on the look of his film in this, and it really continued on to his more recent films. But yeah, you still have the amazing reference-laden dialogue and the incredible direction and performances that you see in any Tarantino film, and for me it's one of his best. Number 17 is Flying High, or Airplane as it's known in pretty much the rest of the world.
The stewardess said both pilots.
Can you fly this plane and land it?
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
So this is a Zucker Abraham Zucker film from the late 70s. During the 70s, there were a lot of airplane disaster films that came out. It was Airport 75, all those kind of sequels. So this is basically a parody of those films, and it's still hilarious today, even by today's standards. It's still a very funny film, and it has all the trademarks of a ZAZ film, dialogue humour and the background humour. It's really non-stop craziness and hilarity the whole way through, and it also introduced audiences to Leslie Nielsen as a comic actor. Up to that point, he was very much more a dramatic actor and had been in a lot of B-grade and some C-grade movies, but it was really a chance for him to take that dramatic aspect of his acting and put it into like a satirical mode in this film, and it pays off so beautifully, and he really went with that as he made more films like the Naked Gun films and so on, and it's so hilarious, his deadpan comic delivery of his lines and his reactions to everything. It's very much played quite seriously, but is so funny to watch. It's definitely still one of the funniest films I've ever seen, and is still funny to this day. So if you haven't seen it, track it down, because if you don't laugh, there's something wrong with you, I think. So check it out.
Can't stand it anymore. I've got to get out of here. I've got to get out of here. Calm down. Get a hold of yourself.
Stewardess, please let me handle this.
I've got to get
Calm down now. Get back to your seat. I'll take care of this. Calm down. Calm down. Get a hold of yourself.
Doctor, you're wanted on the phone. Everything's gonna be all right. Please.
Sister, please, I'll handle this.
I've got to get out of here. I've got to get out of here. Out of here. I've got to get out of here.
Number 16 is Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I've got a special edition DVD here. It's like a little crime folder. So cool.
Drink the drink.
But I don't want the drink.
He doesn't want the drink.
He does.
I don't.
You do.
I don't.
You do.
I don't.
You do.
I don't.
You don't.
I do.
You don't.
I do.
You don't.
Listen, when I say I do, that means I do.
So this little live action and animation blend crime caper from 1988 is a technological marvel in every sense of the word. It's still incredible to watch today. Bob Hoskins, who's the late British actor, is perfectly cast in this film as a Dick Tracy-like character, Eddie Valiant. He's a detective, basically running after this crazy character named Roger Rabbit, who has been accused of murder and basically needs to prove his innocence. Bob Hoskins is brilliant on his accent, his movements. As an adult, it was still very convincing that he's playing alongside these animated characters, just because he's such a great performer. And very funny, even though his character is quite serious. And alongside him, you have Christopher Lloyd as Judge Doom, who, as a child watching this film, was terrifying. Every scene he's in has kind of his collar is sort of blowing like it's in the wind, and which is very practical but extremely effective. We also hear some amazing voice acting from Kathleen Turner, who was uncredited in this film, but has probably most of the most memorable lines of this film as Jessica Rabbit. Some are still being quoted even today, 30 years after the film has come out. As I said about the effects, they were state of the art back in 1988, and it was really awesome to see both Warner Brothers and Disney characters in the same scenes in the same film, which would definitely not be a possibility in today's world with all the bureaucracy between all the studios. So yeah, it's definitely worth checking out as both a hilarious comedy and like a technological achievement in animation and special effects.
I'm not bad. I'm just drawn that way. But tell me, Eddie, is that a rabbit in your pocket or are you just happy to see me?
Number 15 is Shock Treatment.
Hi, Brad. I've just come to tell you how fabulous I am.
Janet, why's that lovely dress I made you?
Oh, Mac just whipped up this little crowd pleaser.
You're practically naked.
Well, I can't wear anything under it, Daddy. It would spoil the line.
My God, Janet, how can you say such things? Look at Brad. Look what they've done to him.
Janet's parents?
Are you the doctor?
Yes.
There's going to have to be an investigation. There are regulations about this sort of thing.
It's for his own good.
So this has got to be possibly one of the most underrated musicals and films of all time. It was the follow-up to the Rocky Horror Picture Show, which was written by Richard O'Brien. This is also written and starring Richard O'Brien, but it's definitely not as well known, even though it has developed a cult following of its own over the years. It's nowhere near the size of the Rocky Horror Picture Show cult audience, but it's still a really awesome film and a really awesome musical. If you can find it. It is quite hard to find, especially in this country, so I bought my copy over in Canada. It was only released as a midnight movie in the beginning to sort of cement its status as a cult film before it even began. So right off the bat it didn't really have a great start because I think people were expecting something a lot different than what they got. But that really is the beauty of this film, that in a lot of ways it's very different from Rocky Horror, but still has that sense of fun and mischief and weird wacky sense of humour that Rocky Horror had as well. You get a lot of the same cast in this, so Richard O'Brien, Patricia Quinn, Little Nell, they all make a return, but playing different characters, and the characters of Brad and Janet, who in this story are basically put on a TV show in Denton, which has become this big TV studio, and Janet's sort of manipulated into becoming this star. So Brad and Janet are now played by two different actors, and these new actors are actually quite good as well, even though Janet has now got a completely different singing voice and it's much deeper to Susan Sarandon. But yeah, the songs are still awesome, they're still memorable. Barry Humphries plays Bert Schnick, who's this seemingly blind TV host, and he's quite entertaining and very energetic in his role. The plot about media manipulation and reality-based television was way ahead of its time back in 1981 when this came out. If you are a Rocky Horror fan and you haven't seen this or don't even know that it exists, definitely track it down if you can and check it out. Because you might find you actually enjoy it. Just don't expect the same thing as Rocky Horror, because it's definitely not the same. Many people will call this not a sequel but an equal, because it's very much not a sequel, because it has really nothing to do with Rocky Horror except for the fact that Brad and Janet are in it and it's set in Denton. That's really the only thing that the two films have in common. Otherwise it's quite a different musical, but still lots of fun and still one of my favourites.
A sadder and a wiser man, he rose the morrow morn.
Does this bird belong to you?
Number 14 is The Fifth Element.
You got lucky. They don't chase you after a mile, they don't chase you. I think it's 2 miles. Hang on.
bad English.
So Luc Besson's late 90s sci-fi adventure is still an incredible film, 2 decades after it was released. In the late 90s, the special effects in this film were beyond incredible, and they're still quite a marvel to look at today. Even the scene where Lulu jumps into the city traffic from the top of the skyscraper is still one of my favourite shots in any film. It's such a beautiful and an incredible shot, and looks amazing. And yeah, the special effects are really a huge part of this film. But what makes this film so incredible for me, along with that, is how great the cast is and how wacky the film is altogether. And it's very much a blend of different genres. You've got sci-fi, you've got action, you've got comedy. So it's a lot of and then there's a bit of drama in there too. And so all of these elements in The Fifth Element are thrown in there, and it's just really quite an epic film because of that. And along with Mila Jovovich as Lulu, who is really fantastic. You have Bruce Willis, who really cements his action star status in this film after movies like Die Hard and that sort of thing, and is really quite perfect as Corbin Dallas. And Gary Oldman, who plays the villain in this piece, is amazing as always. Just very understated and quite wacky, but menacing as well. It is interesting to note too that Bruce Willis and Gary Oldman's characters don't actually come into contact with each other the entire film, which is quite a rare thing in a film where the antagonist and protagonist don't even see each other. There is, I think, one frame of this film where they're actually together, but they still don't make any contact. So that's quite incredible. If you want to watch the film and you can see that, it's if you didn't know that, it's quite amazing. And along with that, you've probably got one of the most wackiest characters ever put to a film, which is Ruby Rhod, played by Chris Tucker, who is really probably the defining aspect of whether you will love or hate this film. His character is just so over the top and so almost annoying. Many would say he is annoying, but he's just really wacky, and just the way, the flamboyancy of the character in the design and the performance is just really quite melodramatic and over the top. That Chris Tucker plays it so beautifully and brilliantly, and for me it's hilarious. But many would argue that it's more annoying than funny, but I found it quite funny. It's definitely one of the best parts of the film for me, his performance. All those aspects work together to make a really classic film, and definitely worth checking out if you are into sci-fi or comedy or just Luc Besson's really amazing lineup of films. This is definitely one of his best for me.
I've never negotiated.
You mind if I try?
No, sure. We're sending somebody in to negotiate.
Anybody else want to negotiate?
Lucky number 13, it's Ed Wood.
I just did a play in Hollywood, and Victor Crowley himself praised its realism.
There's about 500 guys in this town that can say the same thing. On the phone, you said you had some special qualifications?
Mr. Weiss, I have never told anyone what I'm about to tell you, but I really want this job. I like to dress in women's clothing.
So this is still my favourite Tim Burton film, and one of his lesser-known efforts actually from the early 90s when he was making much bigger films like the Batman movies and Edward Scissorhands, and he displays such an affection and detail to the filmmaker Edward Woodward Jr., who made he's a very notoriously known filmmaker for Plan 9 from Outer Space, which is many would consider one of the worst films of all time, but this whole film was basically about his filmmaking journey, and is played really brilliantly by Johnny Depp, who, as you know, is in pretty much every Tim Burton film, but again, this is probably one of his best performances, not just in any Tim Burton film, but in any of his films. He kind of plays it kind of like a little bit like the Scarecrow from The Wizard of Oz, and this kind of like enthusiasm this man has for filmmaking, even though he really doesn't know much about it. That aspect of the character is really portrayed quite well by Johnny Depp. But on the other end, you have an Oscar-winning performance from Martin Landau, who plays Bela Lugosi, who at the time was quite well known for the Dracula films, but had basically no career and was resurrected by Ed Wood in his films, and basically made his last film with Plan 9 from Outer Space. And yeah, Martin Landau is so spot on with his portrayal of this character, and was very much deserving of the Oscar he won that year for Best Supporting Actor. The whole film is in black and white, which is quite ambitious, and yeah, it doesn't affect the enjoyment of the film for me at all. It actually makes it all the more enjoyable. But it's a lot like Bowfinger. It's definitely worth watching if you're a struggling filmmaker or a low-budget filmmaker. And I really personally enjoy films about those sorts of characters, and because I guess I can really relate to them in a way. But yeah, it's quite a comedic gem, and definitely one of Tim Burton's greatest films.
Beware. Take care. Beware. Wait! Pull the string! Pull the string! Cut. Perfect.
Number 12 is Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds.
Hey Johnny, Dusty, nicotine, nicotine, busted for quality, now. I'm married, my wife is a month of June. This'll Russelty, now. I brought her home by the light of the moon. This'll Russelty, hey Johnny, Dusty, nicotine, nicotine, busted for quality, willity, wallity, now.
So this is still, all these decades later, a terrifying film for a lot of reasons, mainly due to the brilliance of Alfred Hitchcock's direction. His suspense and tension that he throws into all of his films is very much on display in this film. And yeah, there really isn't that much violence coming on the heels of Psycho, which had such a huge impact on cinema. Mustn't have been easy, and he really makes quite a fantastic follow-up with this film, and really is just as suspenseful, if not more suspenseful, than what Psycho was. There are so many great sequences in this film, and so many amazing practical effects, which back in 1963 were not so practical. It was pretty normal, but now today seems very practical effects, but are very effective effects as well. The main tension comes from inciting the fear from mere sound effects and visuals rather than cheap scares and gore that so many horror films rely on today. And you have an incredible performance from Tippi Hedren, who was her first film. the simple effects by today's standards don't take away from the suspense and shock of the certain scenes, like the scene at the schoolhouse and the attack on the gas station and the notoriously well-known telephone box scene as well. And of course that final scene is the characters escape Bodega Bay, surrounded by thousands of the winged creatures. It's really quite an amazing feat for Hitchcock, and as far as cinematic audiences were concerned, it was one of his last greatest films. But in my opinion, he made great films up until the day he dropped dead. So, but yeah, this is really one of my favourites from him, and yeah, can still really incite fear in the film watcher. So if you're a Hitchcock fan or even just a horror suspense fan, check it out because it's a really good one.
Well, if I go across to Santa Rosa, I'll come out on the freeway much earlier, won't I?
Yes, and the freeway is much quicker.
Yeah, but she'll be hitting all the heavy traffic going back to San Francisco.
Just listen to those lovebirds.
Mitch.
Cover your faces! Cover your eyes!
Number 11 is John Carpenter's The Thing. So from one master of suspense to the next.
Bennings was right there, Mac. I swear to God it had a hold of him.
It isn't Bennings.
So John Carpenter made a really impressive lineup of films during the 1980s, which at the time were mostly ignored by movie-going audiences and quite torn apart by critics. But over time, they've become these classics of cinema, and John Carpenter has become basically an auteur among the filmmaking community and filmmaking fans. Which is great. It's just, at the time it wasn't a massive hit with audiences or with critics, but watching it back now you can see why it's become such a classic. It's got so many incredible elements that make it the terrifying film it is. The main thing for me are the practical effects, which today are really just not a thing. There's CGI laden marketplace out there. There's these practical effects like stop motion and miniatures and animatronics aren't really used in films anymore, and this film makes such great use of these effects, and they're all just executed incredibly well and make the film all the more terrifying. I mentioned before about Carpenter being an auteur. I mean, he's basically a genre in himself with his films. This is a prime example. He really builds the tension to unprecedented levels and shocks and awes the audience with these top-notch practical effects. And those effects, along with the talented cast, including Kurt Russell, really bring a sense of realism and human fear to the film. And by the end, we're still wondering what's going to happen next. It's definitely one of the greatest horror films of all time, and has really stood the test of time and is still, by today's standards, an incredible horror film and just an incredible film in general, and one of John Carpenter's greatest.
Clear!
Clear.
that's number 20 to number 11. Thanks for watching, and we're down to the last video, so see you next time for number 10 to number 1. Have a good one.